Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the reports that Boris Johnson may be planning to stuff the House of Lords with puppets in order to push the Conservatives' agenda more easily. Now, such a move would of course be a constitutional and democratic outrage, and I will discuss that aspect, but what's more important to me is why is he doing it? I think it might be related to the Northern Ireland Protocol, you know. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So this latest outrage is based on a paper written by right-wing Australian strategist Lynton Crosby, who's done work for the Conservatives. He masterminded their 2019 campaign. He's still doing a little bit of work for them now. It's a suggestion that Boris Johnson, in his resignation honours list, creates between 39 and 50 new Tory peers in the House of Lords. Before I go over the really awful part of the plan, some context first of all. So, currently there are 761 sitting members of the House of Lords. That's over 100 more than sit in the House of Commons. So, by definition, there are now more unelected parliamentarians than elected ones. So, straight away, that's not on. But this number has grown under Boris Johnson. Johnson claimed he wanted to reduce the number of peers. In fact, since David Cameron, there has been a bit of an effort to try and reduce it. But he bloated the chamber instead. You know, Boris Johnson is nothing if not Mr. Opposite of what he says. But perhaps contrary to popular belief, the Conservatives do not have a majority there. There are 252 Conservative peers, which is about a third. Granted, there are a few what are called crossbench peers who are really Tories as well, so that bungs the number up a bit. And it is still easily the largest party in terms of official numbers as well. But it does mean that the government is not guaranteed to get controversial legislation through if it doesn't have the mandate of being part of a manifesto promise. If it's part of a manifesto promise, they sort of have to let it through because, you know, the Commons at the end of the day is elected and people voted for their manifesto. Johnson's plan, well, Crosby's plan, but if Johnson does it, it would vastly increase the number of Tory peers. But there is another part to the plan. The appointments would have to sign away their right to vote as they see fit. The thing about making someone a lord is it's a bit permanent. So once you've done it, you don't really have any control over that person anymore. They can vote as they see fit, which is why in our increasingly childish government, we sort of see the House of Lords at the moment as being the adults in the room. So it's weird, the unelected Lords tend to behave better than the elected MPs. But, so what do you do about that? Well, the plan is that these appointments would have to sign away their right to vote as they see fit. They would have to agree to vote with the government. Now, this is how it's phrased by Gordon Brown, former Labour Prime Minister, who says he's seen the draft proposal. I'll link the article down below. It's worth a read. I don't know whether he means government as in Conservatives because they're just the government at the moment, or the government in general. Because if it's the latter, that would imply they'd have to be forced to vote with Labour if they won the next general election. That would be very odd. Now, the thing is that lots of people are focusing on the unconstitutional, undemocratic nature of the plan, and everything about it is outrageous. He's going to appoint people with absolutely no good reason to be in Parliament. He will be appointing a lot of such people, massively inflating a chamber that already has more members than the elected House of Commons. And he will be forcing them to blindly vote whichever way the also unelected government tells them to. But the question for me throughout all this, when everyone else is getting outraged, is why? Are people forgetting that Johnson's leaving office and he doesn't give a fig about the Conservatives or their political agenda? Are people thinking he's doing this as a thank you present for the Conservative Party that made him Prime Minister? He doesn't care about them. All Boris Johnson entered politics for was to become Prime Minister. His childhood dream was to become World King. That was the best he could manage, being Prime Minister. He can't actually be World King. No such position. He doesn't care about anything else. He doesn't care about Brexit. He knows it's a terrible idea. He doesn't care about the culture wars. He's a bigot, but fundamentally doesn't care. He doesn't care about immigration. He doesn't care about any of the policies he was pushing in government. He only cared about being Prime Minister. He cares about being loved. He doesn't want to govern. He just wants to feel important, to have people tell him how great he is. But he's going. Right now, he's massively pissed off at the party who ejected him. He thinks it's a betrayal. He thinks he's also coming back in a blaze of glory next year, but for now, he's going. So why might he consider a proposal that would, on the face of it, help his successor to govern? That's the last thing he wants. It's said that he's backing Liz Truss because he thinks she'll crash and burn and the party will beg him to come back a year later. Then I got to thinking about the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill. This bill was made especially harsh by Liz Truss. Johnson wanted it softening considerably, but Truss insisted. She didn't insist on this because she's a hardline Brexiteer. That's what she's claiming. She's like Boris Johnson. She converted for political progression. She toughened it up to appeal to the right of the party ahead of what was already looking like a showdown with Sunak when Johnson fell, something that was inevitable from the end of last year. But Truss doesn't want the bill, and she certainly doesn't want its consequences. I know Liz Truss isn't the brightest, but she understands the consequences. Bear in mind that it is Liz Truss as Trade Secretary who wrote a letter to Sunak and Gove in 2020 to ask when we would be implementing our post-Brexit border controls. She was quite clear about the consequence of not doing so. We still haven't done so, by the way. And the consequences she warned about are very apparent. She may be a bit thick and she may be lazy, but she does understand the basics. She knows that the trajectory of the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill is a full-blown trade war with the EU. She knows that the UK cannot afford this economically and that she cannot afford it politically. But she can't just drop it either. She can't even slow it down, really. It wasn't expected to clear the common stages before summer. That was not anticipated at all. So she might have been able to delay the third reading in the House of Commons. She can't now. Johnson's made sure it's all gone through. I've already said I think he did that to cause her trouble. But Truss still has some hopes. The Lords might reject the bill, on the grounds that it breaks the law and it breaches other treaties and it's not in line with the manifesto promise. I don't think they will. I don't see a lot of people thinking that this is a strong hope, but they might. They certainly have reason to. Or if they don't block it completely, they might amend the bill to make it much weaker. For example, requiring a vote in Parliament before ministers are allowed to trigger its effects. Tory MPs who didn't vote against the bill might vote against ministers being allowed to trigger its effects if it means a suspension of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement. Truss could claim that she's upheld her end of the bargain with the ERG, but others are frustrating and stopping her using it. Like with Johnson, she could withdraw the whip from a load of MPs who vote against it and go into the next election on a platform of this new Brexit policy in order to play for time. But this plan by Crosby, which we do not know Johnson intends to do, by the way, or I don't, but this would make it harder for Truss to delay or soften this Brexit bill. If Johnson packs the Lords with up to 50 new peers who are guaranteed to vote the way the government tells them to, the bill has more chance of not just passing, but passing unamended. That means Truss will be stuck with the bill in all its misplaced glory. This bill that was harder than Boris Johnson wanted, and Boris Johnson can go, I told you made it too hard. There'll be nothing to stop ministers disapplying the Northern Ireland Protocol other than the instruction of the Prime Minister. And she can't afford to dither. Sunak could struggle to delay for a while. He hasn't built his support around the patronage of the ERG. But Truss has, and in a big way. She has agreed to be their willing puppet. Now, I think it would be mad for the Tories to get rid of the new leader before the next election, so she should be able to feel safe until the next election, because it would look massively chaotic if they had a third Prime Minister in the space of one Parliament. The public would look on in horror. But the ERG don't care what the party look like. They don't care what happens to the party any more than Johnson does. They are only in the party for what they can get out of it. And if they can't get what they demand, what is the point of the party? That's their attitude, just like it was with Johnson. So they would not hesitate to sink her if she defied them. And she is in a much weaker position than Johnson to even dodge them. Johnson had wider support in his parliamentary party due to his election win. Even when MPs didn't like his behaviour or his policies, they approved of his electoral assets. Truss cannot fall back on that because she is as yet untested. She will remain in a weak position unless and until she can win a general election. That means she has to hang on for 2 years. I see no way of delaying the intended use of the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill for 2 years because it's quite clear now it could well pass inside this year, before Christmas. So if Johnson does this, my guess that he's doing it not to help Truss govern, but to sabotage her, land her with the consequences of her own attempts to court the ERG. If he can make sure that the House of Lords has little chance, or as little chance as possible, of helping her out by either weakening her position on the protocol or blocking it altogether, she runs out of road much sooner than she was planning. But motivation aside, the plan is still an affront to parliamentary procedures, so much so it may have unintended consequences. Keir Starmer is known to want the Lords reforming a great deal. He's not making a big deal of it in terms of campaign purposes. And when I say he's in favour of reforming it a great deal, I mean abolishing it in its current form. But if the system is further stacked against a Labour government, it doesn't provide a much stronger motivation to carry out those reforms as soon as they're in office. After the next election, the current trajectory is that Labour would win. I still think a minority government is the most likely. That already makes it difficult for them to get legislation through. If they've got a House of Lords that is politically stacked against them, they will be forced to get rid of it sooner rather than later. Johnson's massive overuse of the elevation of political toadies and foreign agents may have the result of ending the practice altogether, forever. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships, and until next time, I'll see you later.